We often focus that well-being can't be the extra, the last thing, the added to the backpack, and you feel more overwhelmed because now you've got to do all of the things of well-being. So we want to shift that and tap into the self-efficacy first, recognizing caring for ourselves is actually foundational. It's being human first. Then how do we leverage that? And also, how do we integrate well-being in these small practices throughout our day? We shouldn't be afraid of these, what we call falling on your face failures. It's just a part of life. And because of that adversity, we are able to really learn and grow. So we can make the parallel in terms of those life scares. We can wait for that to happen, or we can take a proactive and intentional approach ahead of time that will support our awareness, our capacity, our development, our growth. And if those events do happen, okay, it's learning. It's an opportunity for learning.
Before we get into this episode, I just want to make a little disclaimer. On this podcast, I speak so much about holding ourselves accountable. And so being transparent with you, we did have some technical difficulties in this podcast. The camera actually started to overheat as we were recording. And so if at the end of the video you see a slight change in video quality, it's because we had to switch from the camera to the phone. But with that being said, it was incredibly interesting to be speaking with Lisa. And one of the things that she really wanted to highlight was how as entrepreneurs, we have this tendency of being very resilient. So we are very connected to our passion, very connected to our why, which is incredible and really gives us that drive to create and really materialize these different projects. And if we aren't aware of this pattern, it can lead us to really slip away from our own well-being and our own well-being practices. And so one of the things that she really mentioned was how there's such a unique parallel between resilience and self-compassion, and asking ourselves the questions of how can we be kind to ourselves to still hold ourselves accountable. And the last thing that Lisa wanted to mention was how the IE University's center really is creating and doing an incredible job at making well-being accessible for everyone. So from students to faculty to alumni, but really creating these resources and creating a culture of being able to nurture and prioritize your well-being and nurture, as she mentions in the episode, of your mind, body, and soul. So without further ado, I'm excited for you to get into this episode. I invite you to make yourself your favorite cup of tea, go on a walk, put on your headphones, and just absorb and take in all of the beautiful wisdom that Lisa so kindly shared with us today on this podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Brave Self podcast. As you can see, we are in a very different location today. We are not recording at my in-home studio. We're actually at IE University because we have a very special guest. She is originally from California and is now the director for the Center of Health and Wellbeing at IE University, and also serves as a leadership development and executive coach. Her work is truly pioneering wellness and well-being in the workplace. And I'm so excited and so honored to have her as a guest here today, Lisa Bevill.
Thank you, Rafio. It's truly a pleasure to be here. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk a little bit more about this concept of well-being and how we can take it to the practice.
Mm-hmm. I actually want to start off a bit off script, but just as I was doing the introduction, I said wellness instead of well-being. And I remember that was a huge thing as I was sending you the podcast script. Do you want to explain a little bit about the difference? And
Sure, absolutely. So there's still a lot of connotation around the different words of wellness, well-being, happiness, and we're working really hard to gain a greater traction or more holistic understanding of what these words mean. And language really does matter. So wellness, we've typically associated more with external or physical. So you go to a wellness spa, a wellness retreat, right? And those you're going to be taking a holistic approach, but it does have a tendency or a connotation more towards the physical or external. And so we have chosen to specifically focus on well-being. Actually, there's a lot around mental health and well-being, but the connotation in the past has been as a scare, mental health and well-being, as if mental health were something negative, when mental health is actually positive. It's showing that we have this capacity to manage our and create a capacity within our mind and sort of have a healthy balance. So at the Center for Health and Wellbeing, we specifically chosen to focus on well-being because we feel it's the broadest and most holistic. So our framework is around body, mind, and soul, recognizing the integration of those three elements are going to be really important to take a holistic approach to managing ourselves for greater positive impact and human leadership beyond, to create these positive ripples.
That's very inspiring. I first want to start back to the origins. The origins of Lisa, your journey, especially when it comes to merging your passion for well-being, especially into the professional path. So you started in Southern California. I know you've lived in Germany and New York and now landed in Madrid. Could you share a bit about what inspired you to pursue this career path?
Okay. So when I started out, I didn't have this career path in mind. I didn't really know what career path I had in mind. And as I was graduating from college, the question of what do you want to do was probably the worst question I could get asked. So when I look back and really I was able to make sense out of my path and my major decisions in life when I learned about character strengths, which was one of the first interventions by positive psychology under the leadership of Martin Seligman. And the idea behind the study was to consider what makes us human and how those strengths are tendencies that we have that are more natural in us, that then we can consider how we use them, the practical side. Are we using them in the right measure, over, under use? And all human beings have these strengths. So just to share from the start, my strengths are around curiosity, kindness, gratitude, zest, and social intelligence. And I've seen those character strengths represented in my major life decisions. So we were just speaking before the podcast. I'm a proud Californian. I grew up in Southern California at the beach. I played volleyball. I really feel connected with California and that upbringing. I think my family has a really important impact in shaping who I am and how I see the world. We all do. Our families and where we grew up, all is going to shape how we see the world. And at some point, I felt I wanted to discover a different part of the country. I also played volleyball. I'm on the shorter side. I don't think I can play volleyball today with how tall everyone is. And I went to play on the East Coast. And for me, that was fascinating to be able to see a different part of the country. And I ended up in New York. And during my time there, I really wanted to study abroad and continue exploring. Being from California, I wanted to learn Spanish, but I also wanted to go to Europe. So for me, it was quite easy. Spain, Madrid was in the capital. It was a very logical choice, but it was driven by that zest for life, the curiosity, and this human connection that I'm always looking for. And I had a wonderful experience. And when I graduated from college, I considered coming back, but I ended up actually working in the United States first. And the motivators for my first job out of college were, again, around learning, this curiosity, discovery, and exposure to how a company works, and being able to travel as well. So I worked in internal audit for a reinsurance company that was under the Berkshire Hathaway group. And it gave me a wonderful opportunity to work on projects, meet new people, understand, and travel. That was my big question. Is it really going to be 40% travel, right? And so those characteristics or character strengths have really shaped my major decisions. And the company needed to have someone in Germany, and I offered and saying this would be wonderful for me. And I ended up staying 2 years there, and then decided to continue my learning and make a shift in my career because I felt I wanted to connect with a deeper sense of purpose and impact. And I felt an MBA was a great way to keep learning and make that transition in my career. So I came to Madrid, to IE, studied my MBA, had a wonderful experience. I'm coming up on my 20-year reunion, and really connecting with people. You don't realize how much of an impact they have at the time, but over the years you see what you've been able to learn and grow from the experiences. And from there, I continue to work at IE and discover and look for new challenges around curiosity, learning, kindness, connecting with people, and impact. And that has slowly led me into what is my career today. I studied a second master's in positive leadership that had a true impact in how I could see the world. And I have that really elevated this focus on human development and our character strengths and how we're developing ourselves in an approach that's not based on a deficit, but how we can continue learning and building from our experiences.
That's so fascinating. I think that especially with other podcast guests and linking all these different stories, one of the biggest underlying factors is that curiosity, and is that, I feel like what I've learned from a lot of these different people is that they didn't learn what their strengths were just sitting around and waiting for one day their purpose to come in and it be the next big thing in the world. No, it was from trial and error, this curiosity, seeing, oh, you know what, this is what's exciting me now, so I'm going to go this path. And then eventually kind of it all leading towards this one greater thing that looking back now you can
see the thread looking back.
Yeah.
Yet at the time, it might not be as clear in terms of what is that career path. And the Center for Health and Wellbeing at IE only was founded in 2019. So we're on 5 years, going on 6. But this position didn't exist even in my MBA. So, and that's where I can tap back into my California roots, that a lot of this focus of positive psychology and learning and human development came from the family dynamic and how I was seen, or how that dynamic shaped how I saw the world. And so it's wonderful to see that personal values and strengths coming through, but then also the discovery and making my own career path and out of something that I'm truly passionate about.
Yeah, and kind of paving your own way, right? As you were saying,
Correct.
that when you were doing the MBA, this wasn't an open position, but it kind of just led into it. I want you to tell us, for the listeners that are listening, for the people who are listening to us right now, you said that the center opened in 2019. That is not too long ago, but I feel like there has been such a change within well-being in the workplace. But when you first started, it might not have been the same. What were those initial challenges? Walk us through them.
Okay, so positive psychology as a concept is, even though it's been documented longer, it really came to the forefront in the late 1990s and in 2000. So I graduated from college in 2000 and I hadn't heard anything about positive psychology. So it's fairly new as a focus, and this human potential is quite new. What's really wonderful to share about the center was that it was founded before the pandemic. A lot of the focus had been on mental health, but in terms of this scare, we have to do something about mental health, as if mental health were bad. And the IE took a very holistic approach and innovative approach to say we have this responsibility as an academic institution shaping the leaders of tomorrow in this uncertain and changing time that we're quite accustomed to. Well, what do we need? What is it that we can do to better create positive impact? And so this holistic approach to development of human beings. And that was the foundation of the center. And our framework is, as I mentioned, around the integration of body, mind, and soul, recognizing that we're not just sitting in a chair studying, but that we are innovating and thinking and leveraging the diversity we bring together and being able to overcome setbacks and think innovatively in times of uncertainty, and to look from an angle of opportunity and creation rather than, again, of this deficit. So that was wonderful to see an institution so innovative as IE be ahead of the curve in creating this center. And the center was originally named the Center for Health, Wellbeing, and Happiness. We eventually took off the name happiness, which many people speak about happiness. I get the question, oh, so you're against happiness? Okay, no, by no means we're against happiness. Yet there seems to be a push to that we should be happy. Now, happiness and these many different feelings or emotions that we have are all wonderful, and they're data signals. So we want to embrace all of them and recognize what it truly means to be content in our path. And that path is going to come with challenge, this traditional sense of failure, which is not failure, it's just experience, it's learning. And how can we learn from that and continue to grow through adversity challenge, change, uncertainty. So we've shifted the name to, again, focus on health and well-being and holistically look at well-being.
I love that. I'm thinking of someone who's listening right now who may not fully understand or encompass what's this difference of holistic well-being rather than well-being. You know, they may think of well-being as exercising, eating well, like very the body aspect, which I'm pretty
Correct,
sure
yes.
you're talking about. Could you explain a little bit more about this holistic aspect, this aspect that you say that it's an integration of these three different things, mind, body, and soul?
Okay, wonderful. I was speaking just recently with the dean of the School of Science and Technology here at our university, and he's leading extremely innovative programs, and we're talking a lot about what is the impact of AI. And so from the center perspective, we say, what is well-being in the age of AI? So this is how do we take this concept of well-being, which has its connotations and its understandings, and really bring it down to a tangible level where we can transfer that into scientific, evidence-based knowledge and ultimately into practice. And when we get to the practice, we do come back to the basics about nutrition and exercise, but the latest science is showing how important a more holistic understanding of what nutrition means and the impact on our energy and our brain, the gut-brain connection, et cetera, can have. So let's give an example from well-being in the age of AI. We can study and we can go to the School of Humanities and consider ethics, philosophy, what it means to be happy, and that's been discussed for centuries. Yet, what does that look like today? And when we see an influence of technology that's capturing our attention and training us to look for this very short-term dopamine hit through social media, what is that impact having on our brain, our attentional capacity, our emotional regulation, and our decision-making, our ability to connect with other human beings? As human beings, we are co-regulating. We have always looked to this sort of what is safe, how can we learn from each other, how can we connect on a human level, and that creates a positive emotion that allows us to then continue to give to the community or to build on that positive or have a pro-social action response. And so if we're thinking about what is well-being, holistic well-being, well, if we're staying up on social media because we have this tendency to look at our phone late at night, and in that tendency, when we're tired, we lose track of being tired. We become less aware of our feelings. We have less cognitive capacity in our prefrontal cortex. And the light from our phone is impacting the melatonin production, so we don't feel tired. So we have diminished sense of tiredness in two different ways. The app is helping us scroll through, and the scrolling time passes, and then we go to bed late. We don't have quality of sleep. We don't have quantity of sleep. The quantity of sleep is really important for our emotional processing that happens in the rapid eye movement or REM sleep. We wake up with a sense of tiredness because we haven't lifted that sleep pressure that we've had that builds up throughout the day. So then we start off our day that way. Typically, it's harder to get out of bed. Then we don't maybe have a positive morning routine. We look at the time. We wake up way late. We're rushed, and we don't set the day with intention. Maybe we don't appreciate the sunrise. We don't get our movement or our breath work in. And then we show up to what do we have to do with a more agitated state, which we might not even have appreciated. And there's a lot of science as to the vagus nerve, our neuro connection, our sense of safety on a biological level that we're not even aware of. Well, then that's going to influence the reality that we create with other human beings, and how that reality is going to shape the next. The reality and the emotional lens that we put on in that encounter or engagement is going to shape the next. And so we can create a reality in one way or another. More specifically, if we're talking about programming or algorithms and bias, natural human bias that comes in, it's hard to even recognize the biases that we have and how they're coming into our thinking, our emotions, our reaction, our decision making. Add on to that being exhausted or being feeling pressured or stress. Not stress is quite positive, but this prolonged stress because we feel a greater sense of overwhelm with the macro uncertainty that we're facing and the micro uncertainty of what we're doing. And that's going to be embedded into what we're working on. So there's a real appreciation of how important it is to care for ourselves first, because that will be impacting the reality that we create and the work that we're doing and the longer term impact on our teams, on our communities, on society, on the planet.
Yes, I love the way that you phrase that, because this is something that I say a lot on the podcast, is creating from the inside out. And then really it does start from within, especially with the conversation that we were talking about before, right? That I do want to touch upon in a little bit, of communities, of how we relate to other people, but how that really comes from that base of understanding of yourself, of regulating your nervous system, of understanding all the different patternings and throughout your life, or different things that you could have. I'm thinking of someone that's listening and hearing all about this. I think that there's so much science and backed up evidence more and more with all these different things within sleep. What you're saying about dopamine, where do you recommend someone to begin understanding this, or beginning to become self-aware?
Okay, that's a very power-packed question. It seems simple, but
It seems simple.
but it's a big one. So number one, we talk a lot about awareness, knowledge, and practice. So number one is that waking up to awareness of ownership or autonomy, self-efficacy, that I have choice over how I choose to care for myself. That autonomy is really critical, that awareness of the autonomy, number one. And that taps into our motivation as human beings. Two, in terms of learning, that there is so much to learn. So it's not a matter of, sometimes we feel this deficit. Well, I should have known. Well, no, there's a lot of new science. We're even still discovering more about these connections within our body and our emotional regulation, our nervous system, etc. So how do we start learning? What's interesting? How do we tap into the curiosity? We said curiosity is so important. That there's this, and that will actually activate parts of our brain. Just the fact that we're curious to find something out, right? And then start making small changes. What do we notice? I notice, I have a lot of students and executives say, the first thing I do is pick up my phone in the morning. And then I notice that has an impact in the rest of my day. Or I notice the time goes by and I don't realize it, or I feel a sense of urgency or angst when I'm on my phone first thing in the morning. So then we can pay more attention to those emotions as signals and actively decide and intentionally decide to make changes. And then those changes will start piling up or stacking together, or we'll start seeing that if I put my phone away sooner and dedicate time to a moment of gratitude, journaling, breath work before I go to bed, I actually sleep better. So I wake up feeling more rested. And then we see a positive spiral due to these positive emotions that help us to then continue to build those positive habits that are going to help us to be our best. So that when we are hit with something that's more challenging, we have a far greater capacity to be able to meet that, embrace the emotions the feelings that we have, and be able to respond in a way that's appropriate. And that's resilience, really. It's the capacity that we have to meet the challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And especially with the nervous system really expanding the capacity with your window of tolerance, right? Of actually with these different stressors in day-to-day life. I think one question that I have been asking myself, and I'm curious as to what you believe, is that I love what you said of I have a choice, because I think that that's something very key, and that a lot of people that already will kind of flip the switch for them of understanding that they actually have that autonomy and they have a choice. But I do question, because I feel like especially when you start getting into this well-being, there's so much research, there's so many different modalities, tools, that then it can also stress you out. For example, if you wake up and if you haven't done your morning routine and you've gone to work, but you're stressed out because you haven't done all these different things, what do you think is that fine line between balancing both, so that it obviously doesn't go to the other extreme as well, in which you're stressed out because you're doing all these different well-being things, even if it does come with that
That is a very
intention?
good question as well. So we often focus that well-being can't be the extra, the last thing, the added to the backpack, and you feel more overwhelmed because now you've got to do all of the things of well-being. So we want to shift that and tap into the self-efficacy first, recognizing caring for ourselves is actually foundational. It's being human first. Then how do we leverage that? And also, how do we integrate well-being in these small practices throughout our day? So one is awareness. We keep going back to awareness. Two is this autonomy, self-efficacy. Three is small. Four is being kind to ourselves, being kind to others, and even building on kindness, self-compassion, to recognize that we are all human. I think that's the first thing I said is thank you. I'm so grateful to be here, but I'm human. I'm very human. So yesterday, the night before, I didn't sleep well. I woke up late. I arrived late to a team meeting. I was feeling really tired. And I was able to say that this is where I am. So awareness, sharing that, and recognizing this is not the day to make really big decisions or have that really challenging conversation. And we have a truly wonderful team at the Center for Health and Wellbeing. And I just want to publicly, as I often do, but in this channel as well, give my gratitude to the team. And the response was, I hope you're being kind to yourself today. So then we can say, I'm being kind. This doesn't have to define me. This moment, this morning, this feeling doesn't have to define me, and I have a choice. So I chose to say, I recognize this. I'm going to recalibrate in terms of what I expect from the day, and I'm going to commit to going to bed early. And in that, I can build in gratitude. I can connect more with a particular person. I can take a moment to be in the sunshine and be in nature for a moment. So no matter what, we have choice. And how do we keep tapping into awareness? Possibly that's through an intentional practice such as mindfulness. And I believe kindness and self-compassion are really important. We are in a shortage of kindness and we're in a shortage of self-compassion. If we were all to have that capacity to recognize, appreciate, recalibrate, then it's one day. Today's a new day. And just as in a mindfulness practice, how do we come back to where we are? So recognize, let go without judgment, and come back.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And thank you for sharing the story with the team of 2 days ago and their response, because I think that is something that, especially in this podcast, I do want to highlight, is also changing the way that we relate to others in workplaces. And I think that especially with what you're saying about self-compassion, it starts from there, right? Because at the end of the day, it's if you don't have that self-compassion with yourself, how are you going to feel okay to then show that to others? Because a lot of times you can, from past experience, right? But maybe you feel ashamed or you feel scared. What will this person think? Or will they be taking me seriously? But I feel like when you do start, and I'm curious to hear your opinion as well, but that once you do start really accepting yourself and having that self-compassion, then you understand that this is not who you are, but it's just simply one day in which this happened, and you can share that with other people. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you've been implementing this perspective, this essence into the IE Center for Health and Wellbeing within your team, especially.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, the master's program that I had studied at IE in positive leadership was transformational for me in terms of my awareness, the learning, and the growth. And a couple of elements I could bring in. Martin Seligman's framework for well-being, the PERMA framework, which stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, shapes a lot of what we do. For me, another really inspirational learning was being able to learn directly from Barbara Fredrickson and her work on the upward spiral, the broaden and build theory. And her book is Love 2.0, in case anyone's interested. So the sense of ownership and autonomy is something that we really try to build in. I try to build in that I have choice and that everyone has choice. And then we can collectively work together. I believe there's a true need for grace in society that we can. So whenever something happens, I can say, if you're in traffic and someone cuts you off, well, maybe that person's having a bad day. You don't know the life that that person is living. So how can we be kinder? Kindness is one of my character strengths, so I go to that. Gratitude is a wonderful way to gain perspective. So we can build in gratitude. And I continue to try to build gratitude into my language and into the practices that we have in the team, in my life, but also in the center. So just talking about some of these areas, they've been really foundational in terms of shaping the approach and how we lead. Also, in terms of a natural tendency in my style of communication and work is around collaboration. I like working with other people. I like creating ideas together, and it comes through that collaboration. So all of these have brought a lot of myself into the center and a lot of myself into the team. And we try to build on this integration of body, mind, and soul. So a lot of the questions are, what are we doing to care for our own well-being as an individual? How are we, as a team, setting up systems that are going to help us to prioritize our well-being? And that's where we can get into very practical systems in the works. We set up how we're going to communicate. We discuss who's going to be the lead, how we're going to share this information, how we're going to be organized. They're very tactical in terms of that when we have a greater sense of ownership and organization, that's going to help us in terms of our emotional regulation, our mental health, etc. And then we also challenge each other to how we are going to create a culture where we're leading with well-being, so that our natural response to other people, how we approach collaboration. So that's what specifically within the team. From the center, we've tried to take a holistic approach to the academic portfolio that we've created. So the number one course that we've introduced is what we call Wellbeing in Practice. And the objectives of that course are to explain what we mean by this concept of well-being, show the relevance and importance of well-being in our life and the impact that it has in terms of our own personal human flourishing and growth, the teams, the society, the communities we form a part of, and the work that we're doing. And as a starting point, we go into the P of PERMA by Martin Seligman, based on Barbara Fredrickson's work, which is the broad and build theory of positive emotions, that when we connect as human beings, we create positive emotions, and that will create a positive feeling and a pro-social action response, and we can get on this upward spiral, which is for resilience. So that's the core of our learning. And finally, then we try to support the ownership and agency to say, what do you choose to do? There is no specific equation for well-being. So we want everyone to feel empowered to decide what it is that they want to do, and also say that we have an entire community here at IE to support well-being, whether it be through the different clubs, through sports and well-being, through projects that they're working on to tap into a deeper sense of purpose. Within the business school, there's a purpose accelerator. So there's Music Wednesdays. It's a time to come together and celebrate through music and gathering. The entire innovative and learning culture to say that we're continuously learning. So there are many ways to explore well-being. What we want is it for it to be more tacit and tangible in our day-to-day lives. So we want to empower people to understand, build that awareness, take the knowledge, and then ultimately put those practices into place and recognize how our own care and decisions are going to influence our reality, our learning capacity, our ability to relate and co-regulate with others, and our career growth and developments as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have any story of any faculty or alumni or anyone who's done any of these courses or programs that was transformational, or that you really
Yes,
sticks
I
with
have
you?
lots of stories. We receive such wonderful feedback, which is a great part of the position and the being a part of the center, is to feel and to see and to hear the impact that this learning has on the lives of the many stakeholders in our community. So we've had comments as, wow, this institution really cares, or even from an executive MBA, I was expecting to come and just sit down and be told, and be very academic and very cognitive. And it was this sense of invigorating and empowering that we take this holistic approach and actually provide the learning, or the space for the learning of how interconnected we are and what that means to build this resilience and support learning capacity and positive impact. So lots of comments. A couple of stories that I could share where I had a deeper relationship with students was when I was teaching some electives. And one was just on productive habits. And it's more the mechanism of the habits, right? And a lot of challenges that I've seen that young people face are around technology, especially around sleep. So it's this combination of our day-to-day where we're feeling very connected to technology, but almost scattered in that we're bouncing, our mind is bouncing, right? And so it's very hard to settle at the end of the day. And the recognition of the thoughts that we have in our head, the emotions that we feel are often very uncomfortable. And the way that we go about dealing with them is to ignore them, or to push them away, to distract ourselves, to say, I don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling, or I don't want to acknowledge that I didn't get as much done as I would like today, or to just have that awareness and the self-compassion. And so we sort of distract ourselves with technology, or with, things that are very positive, like meeting with friends and socializing. Overused can lead to a decline in some of our healthy behaviors, right? So I see this happen again and again. And then we get into this vicious cycle of, I'm so tired during the day, I feel like a zombie. And then I make it through my day, my classes, my work, what it might be. And then I sort of wake up and I reclaim the day, and then I stay up late, and we train our body to get on this cycle. So one student really shared that, said, I'm going to bed at 3, 4 in the morning. I have classes in the morning or some days, and I have trouble getting up, and I just don't feel alive. I don't feel like I'm living the way I would like to. And so we talked about what habit and what could be a trigger habit that might set this positive wheel in motion. And so this particular student said, I'm going to get up at a certain time. It's really hard, and that's a really hard way to approach it in terms of understanding the mechanism of habits, to focus on the specific action. But I said, I'm going to get up at this certain hour. And it was really hard, but then because he was getting up, he said, all right, then I need to go to bed earlier. So we're linking these two. So he started to go to bed earlier, so he could get up earlier. So then he started, when he was getting up earlier, he started studying more. He felt more confident in his academics and his ability to learn. And because he felt more confident, he was going to class, asking questions, which had this positive ripple effect in terms of his academic performance. Because he felt so confident and accomplished, so if we tap that into the PERMA framework of Martin Seligman, he felt the sense of accomplishment. So he went with a different energy and vigor to sports. And then he was meeting sports and saying, hey, that's great. And so he's feeling more energy through the sports, and then had a different sense of engagement with his friends, rather than kind of like, oh, I'm holding on, I'm reclaiming, I'm with my friends. It was, I'm really present, enjoying my time with my friends. And at the same time, tomorrow I've got to get up early. So I'm going to say goodbye at a reasonable hour. And could say, this is, and get better sleep. So one habit really transformed his entire day and night, his feeling of confidence and accomplishment, his capacity, and so that's what he wrote about in this paper. We will discuss it and see the true impact. That was, a real recognition of what we're talking about in terms of body, mind, and soul. Another was a student in already with his entrepreneurial business and managing studies and his business, and not taking the time to tap into gratitude or purpose or perspective, and just really driving himself in terms of performance. And I find this a lot of times. We feel we have to push ourselves, this drive, and it's sort of the carrot and the stick. So two things that really impacted him in a different course, which was about tapping into holistic practices that are going to support resilience and overcoming adversity, were around mindfulness and self-compassion. And we just ran through it. And there was this fear, if I'm soft on myself, if I'm kind and compassionate with myself, I'm going to be weak. And it was this really built, ingrained belief. And so we would run through the dynamic again and again and say, how can we be kind to ourselves yet still hold ourselves accountable? And that being unkind to ourselves is driving us, but it's not helping us to meet our full potential. And so we worked on, with this class, mindfulness practices. And I always use the same slide, which is about waves, tapping into the California Pacific. And the student said, I love this slide. Like when I get to this slide, I know that it's that moment where we can stop and just be and focus on our breath and pause. So those are two stories, very different, but how the learning can really create a transformational process of change that transfers into different practices, and then that ripple effect of how we're impacting others and creating a different perspective, approach, and realization in our day-to-day.
Yes, definitely. I think especially with what you're saying of having the knowledge, but going back to what you had mentioned in the beginning, which is this agency, this autonomy, this understanding that you can have the knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's your choice to act upon it. And I think one big thing that I'm taking away from this entire conversation and listening to you is just this complete parallel between resilience and self-compassion. It's something that I had never seen it that way. I have always seen resilience as very important, because I think especially when, dealing with stressors, with different things, it's just our capacity to deal with these things. But I had never linked it so side to side with self-compassion. And I think in the end of the day, that's kind of where all of this is going, right? In the sense of, how can I feel everything, or how can I feel this uncomfortable situation that's happening to me without immediately judging myself for it, or thinking that I'm too weak, or thinking that I'm not doing enough. For example, taking it back with the man who you're saying who was more in his entrepreneurship journey. And so really having that awareness of feeling this emotion, feeling that uncomfortable thing. But I think that the thing that really helps you overcome that is having the self-compassion, understanding that this is not you. So it's this whole loop, which I think is incredible. And speaking about resilience, I really want to hone in on this, because I think it's such an important quality, especially with everything that you're speaking about. What would you say, or what would you recommend be like a first starting point into really building that resilience? Because I feel like a lot of times it comes from maybe a negative experience in life. You fall flat, you fail fast, and then you get resilience. But are there ways to do this in a way that doesn't kind of have you falling flat on your face, for example, to then build that resilience, or having a really tough life circumstance?
So a couple of things to answer that question. Oftentimes people will ask me how I got into well-being. Did I have that fall flat on my face, or did I have some tragedy or scare that took me to the path of well-being? And I feel very fortunate to say that this is part of my sort of life journey of discovery, curiosity, and learning and growth. So I feel very fortunate of that. Yet at the same time, we shouldn't be afraid of these, what we call falling on your face failures. It's just a part of life. And because of that adversity, we are able to really learn and grow. So we can make the parallel in terms of those life scares. We can wait for that to happen, or we can take a proactive and intentional approach ahead of time that will support our awareness, our capacity, our development, our growth. And if those events do happen, okay, it's learning. It's an opportunity for learning. And to not, I think there needs to be more about how we can dream big and not be afraid of that what we call failure, because it's just part of the learning process. So I would encourage anyone to try to elevate that fear and recognize that that's a human response, that we want to protect ourselves from that sort of pain, perceived possible pain. And then say, what can I proactively, tapping in again to agency, autonomy, self-efficacy, what can I do to help build my capacity? How can I see life as a journey? How can I gain a longer term perspective? We often look for the quick fix, and that's the technology that we have, sort of how we've grown up. We want the immediate. There is no button to push. Yet if we can make small changes and proactively build our capacity, we will be in a greater position, or with just greater capacity for resilience. And so that would be my approach, to not fear what learning is, and also take a proactive approach to developing resilience. So talking about resilience, the former term was sort of how much you can withstand. And that the definition needs to evolve and say, how do we build our capacity to meet the challenges of the day-to-day and learn from them and recover? And so balance is really critical. Balance and appreciation and perspective. That, for example, I'm extremely adaptable. I'm not going to be bothered by technology, or yet I can be so adaptable that I might not hold my boundaries as I should. So the balance in using our strengths is really critical. And that's the mindfulness and awareness that we need to come to, because we can be so resilient and call ourselves so resilient that we just withstand and keep pushing and pursuing and being driven, especially for entrepreneurs, that we go into burnout. And so where is the balance in having that time to appreciate, to create balance, reflect, gain perspective? And so I want to introduce that with resilience, this concept of balance and perspective.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all these incredible insights, all this understanding. I'm sure it'll help a lot, especially a lot of entrepreneurs I know that are listening to this. I do want to get into our final round of questions.
Okay.
Going to the first question, one word that describes your leadership style.
So I have to tell a story here, because I said collaboration, and I asked my team just to consider what was their opinion, and I got so much positive feedback. It was overwhelming and truly wonderful. And I think there was a general consensus on connecting with passion and this wholeheartedness. And to that, I would add a sense of being true to who you are. And for me, specifically, the sturdiness in being able to be resilient, to be passionate, to pursue what I believe is important.
I love that. Number 2, your go-to morning ritual.
For those of you who know me, that you know this, it's breakfast. I believe in protein for breakfast, family breakfast every morning, and that's critical to start the day.
I love that, because I feel like it's something that not many people say, because you kind of just take it for granted, but it's a whole morning ritual, breakfast.
And culturally, very different. So protein at breakfast, a good balance to start the day.
I love that. Number 3, favorite book that's shaped your career.
So I already mentioned Love 2.0 by Barbara Fredrickson and Flourish by Martin Seligman. I think another one that's really wonderful is The Power Paradox by Dacher Keltner of the University of California, Berkeley. So my California connection. I encourage everyone to read it, but it really builds in what it means to have enduring power and appreciate the stories and perspectives of others.
I'm going to have those all linked below for you to access easily. Number 4, most impactful piece of advice you've ever received.
So best piece of advice, family model is the art of the possible. And in terms of a wonderful holistic leadership, it was about mindfulness, to just sit, to break down all the barriers, just sit.
What's one thing that most people don't know about you?
I'm actually quite sensitive. I think I'm perceived as being very driven, but we talked about vulnerability before, and that I do really care about others and care about what I do, and that can take its toll sometime. So to be very vulnerable and show that inner side is wonderful, and that I'm truly passionate about what I do. Mm-hmm. Maybe those who know me know that better.
Thank you for sharing. What's one thing you wish more people understood about well-being in the workplace?
So that I really, truly would love to have a more holistic appreciation of this concept of well-being, and how we can build that into a very tactical, day-to-day healthy habits. But beyond that, how do we build that into our communication, our processes within the workplace? And if everyone were to take that to a personal level, I believe we could go to a more holistic, collective approach to the way we work and to the way we envision society in the future.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we were saying before, right? Of how we envision and redefine not only society, but also just the different communities that we live in the future in a holistic way. So Thank you for that question. We also have our last section of the Brave Self podcast, in which our previous guest left you a question.
Okay.
And the question that she left you was, if tomorrow you could change just one thing in your life, what would it be?
Okay. So tomorrow is a change because tomorrow is a new day. And I would go back to gratitude to say thank you that the sun has come up, that I am alive, and that I have another day to be myself and to be close to my family, those around me, and to make positive impact.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to leave you the notebook after to give a question for our next guest, but I just want to say thank you so much for being so open with sharing with all of us your journey, your own personal values, everything that you're kind of infusing into the center. I'd love to hear or let our audience know how can they find more about you and your work.
Wonderful. Our website is on the IE University website, the IE Center for Health and Wellbeing. We have a lot of content there that's really aimed at supporting that awareness and the knowledge and ultimately the practice. We say that we want to inspire and empower that autonomy, the efficacy, and the practices. I aspire to a kinder world, and so if we're all to be compassionate, self-compassionate with ourselves, how that would impact. At the center, we talk a lot about being present. How can we truly be present? How can we continuously learn from an academic institution? The learning is fundamental, the curiosity, and also enjoy the experience or enjoy the journey, no matter what that journey is. So I encourage you to look for us on our website. We're all on LinkedIn. You can look and connect with me on LinkedIn. And we also have the IE Wellbeing Center on Instagram. But ultimately, we want to collectively support a culture that's prioritizing taking care of ourselves holistically around body, mind, and soul, and recognizing how we shape our reality and how we can impact our teams, our communities, our society, and the planet in how we choose to be and tap into that deeper sense of meaning in the work that we're doing.
Well, I'm so grateful. It's truly an honor. And thank you for all of you who are listening to this podcast. I invite you to share this with more people if this is something that really interested you and resonated with you. It really helps us continue to grow. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Brave Self podcast.